Once upon a time in London, a little girl named Elizabeth lived in a grand house at 145 Piccadilly. She was born on April 21, 1926, to the Duke and Duchess of York. Later, her parents became King George VI and Queen Elizabeth. Elizabeth had a younger sister named Margaret. The two sisters were very close. Their favorite toy was a small Welsh cottage called O'i Bruthenbach, which means little cottage in Welsh. This cottage was a gift from the people of Wales. Every morning, Elizabeth and Margaret would tiptoe down the wide marble hallways to the library, imagining they were visiting a magical playhouse far away. Elizabeth loved to learn. A kind governess named Marion, whom everyone called Croffy, taught her and Margaret many things. Elizabeth read simple storybooks by candlelight. She practiced French words like bonjour and merci. Croffy taught her about history, geography, and even how to speak on a small radio set. In the daytime, Elizabeth watched out of tall windows as the city moved below. She listened to street vendors calling out their wares and the clip-clop of horses pulling carriages. One day, Croffy took Elizabeth to the palace courtyard to learn how to ride a horse. At first, Elizabeth felt afraid as she climbed into the saddle. The horse was taller than she had ever seen. Its mane brushed her dress, and its hooves made soft thuds on the stone below. Gentle Croffy held the reins and guided the horse in a slow circle. As Elizabeth relaxed, her fear turned into excitement. She held her back straight, her hands steady on the reins, and felt the soft breeze on her cheeks. When the lesson ended, Elizabeth smiled and whispered, "Thank you," to Croffy, feeling proud of her own courage. When Elizabeth was 10, everything changed. Her uncle, King Edward VIII, decided to give up his throne so he could marry the woman he loved, Wallis Simpson. Because of this choice, Elizabeth's father became the new king, George VI. Elizabeth and Margaret moved from Piccadilly to Buckingham Palace. From her bedroom window, Elizabeth saw the palace gardens full of green lawns and bright flowers. She also saw the golden coach and the tall flames of torches lighting up evening events. Crowds of people cheered for her family, and Elizabeth felt both proud and nervous. She understood that one day she would have to lead like her father. In 1939, a great war began in Europe. World War II swept across many countries, and London was not safe. Elizabeth and Margaret left Buckingham Palace and went to Windsor Castle in a quieter part of England. The castle's thick stone walls made Elizabeth feel secure. She talked with Croffy about the news on the radio. Each night she listened to the crackle of voices reporting bombings and battles. She wondered about friends who stayed in London. To help from afar, Elizabeth wrote letters to soldiers and factory workers. She folded small notes on pale blue paper. Inside, she wrote simple words. "Thank you for your hard work and bravery." When she sent the letters, she imagined them bringing comfort and strength. She hoped her words made a tired soldier smile. Elizabeth did more than write letters. When she turned 16, she joined the Auxiliary Territorial Service, called the ATS. She wore a simple uniform and learned to drive and fix engines. Imagine a young princess lifting a hood to peek at a car engine or turning a wrench to tighten a bolt. Elizabeth worked alongside many women who were helping the war effort. Her hands sometimes got stained with grease, but she did not mind. She felt proud that she could do something useful. Even during the war, Elizabeth and Margaret found moments to play. They ran down castle corridors, chased each other under arches, and whispered secrets behind tall tapestries. At times, they held small tea parties with Croffy, sipping warm milk from tiny porcelain cups. Croffy told them stories of brave queens and hidden treasures. Elizabeth's eyes grew wide as she listened, and her mind filled with dreams of adventure. Through these years, Elizabeth learned to speak with calm and confidence. She read poems aloud to her sister, making every word clear and gentle. She practiced new vocabulary with Crawfie, saying each word slowly so it felt strong and true. When Elizabeth's voice reached the chapel or the parade ground, people stopped to listen. They heard not just a princess's voice, but the voice of someone who cared deeply for others. By the time Elizabeth turned 18, she was no longer a little girl playing in a palace. She had become a symbol of hope in difficult times. Londoners remembered the shy child in the carriage, but they now saw a young woman filled with courage. Elizabeth had discovered that every small act, every letter, every repaired engine, every kind word could bring light into the darkest moments, and she knew in her heart that this lesson would guide her for all the years to come. When Elizabeth learned that her father, King George VI, had died on February 6, 1952, she was in Kenya with her husband Philip. She was just 25 years old. That night, she sat quietly by a lamplight and wrote in her journal, "I promise to serve my people all my life." She folded the paper and kept it close. Those simple words became her first vow as queen. A few months later, on June 2, 1953, Elizabeth walked into Westminster Abbey for her coronation. This was the first time a coronation was shown on television. As she moved forward in her silk gown and heavy crown, she felt a mix of awe and nerves. Behind the scenes, she and Philip had practiced their vows in a small room. In soft, clear voices, they spoke as if into a radio microphone. Elizabeth said, "I, Elizabeth, do solemnly promise and vow to serve my people with all my heart." Philip replied gently, "And I, Philip, pledge my support and loyalty." They repeated the lines until each word felt right. When the day came, Elizabeth spoke with a steady voice. She knelt before the archbishop and the abbey fell silent. Then, when she rose, trumpets sounded and the choir's voices filled the air. Millions of people around the world watched her pledge of duty. Shortly after the coronation, Elizabeth and Philip began a journey across the Commonwealth. They traveled first to South Africa. In Cape Town, school children sang a welcome song, their bright voices echoing against the mountains. Next, they flew to Canada. In Toronto, Elizabeth walked along snowy streets and greeted citizens bundled in warm coats. Then they sailed to Australia. At Sydney Harbour, sails of yachts glided past as crowds cheered. Finally, they journeyed to New Zealand. In Wellington, children offered woven gifts and sang national anthems. At each stop, Elizabeth listened carefully to place names in different accents. She waved and smiled, learning how a single word, spoken with kindness, could bring people together. Back home in England, Elizabeth did not keep her queenly duties behind palace walls. She visited a small hospital in Birmingham to learn about charity work. A nurse showed her how to wrap bandages and help feed patients. Elizabeth knelt by a bed and offered a gentle word to an elderly man who missed his family. She wrote later in her diary, "I felt grateful for the kindness of the nursing staff." Through these visits, she understood that service was not only a word, but a way of life. In London's throne room, she met weekly with her prime ministers. Winston Churchill, Anthony Eden, and other leaders came to discuss the nation's needs. Elizabeth listened closely, asking questions that showed she cared. She poured tea from a silver pot and offered a calm smile. Though she remained above politics, her thoughtful presence brought comfort and stability to many. As the years passed, Elizabeth continued to grow in her role. She kept her promise by visiting factories and schools, by attending charity events, and by speaking softly yet firmly when she greeted her people. Each time she took a vow, even a small one. She thought of the promise she made on that night in Kenya. Through her coronation and her travels, Elizabeth discovered that being queen was more than wearing a crown. It was learning from others, sharing in their hopes, and offering help wherever it was needed. She found that a single vow, spoken with a sincere heart, could change not only her life, but also the lives of millions she served. Queen Elizabeth's reign was marked by many special celebrations. In 1977, she celebrated her Silver Jubilee. Families gathered in towns and villages across the United Kingdom. They hung colorful flags and held street parties. The Queen planted a silver oak tree to mark 25 years on the throne. In 2002, she celebrated her Golden Jubilee. Millions of people watched parades and fireworks. The Queen smiled as she waved from the balcony of Buckingham Palace. In 2012, she marked her Diamond Jubilee, 60 years as monarch. A grand river pageant sailed on the Thames. Boats of all sizes floated past Westminster, and cheering crowds lined the riverbanks. Finally, in 2021, she celebrated her Platinum Jubilee. 70 years on the throne set a world record. Children sang songs in every city. Elders told stories of how the Queen had stood with them in times of joy and times of challenge. Beyond these jubilees, the Queen gave her time to good causes. She became patron of over 600 charities. These organizations worked on healthcare, education, and the environment. One of her proudest projects was the Queen's Commonwealth Canopy. She invited countries across the Commonwealth to plant and protect forests. Each tree symbolizes hope for future generations. In Canada, school children helped plant young saplings. In Kenya, community groups guarded forests against illegal logging. In Malaysia, villagers learned new ways to care for water and soil. Through these efforts, the Queen showed that small actions could grow into a greener, kinder world. The arts also found a devoted friend in the Queen. She supported the Royal Ballet, the Royal Shakespeare Company, and many music schools. Each season, she attended performances in London's theaters. She applauded dancers whose shoes whispered across the stage. She praised actors who spoke with passion and truth. Behind the curtains, she sent handwritten notes to say, "Your talent brings joy to many." In museums and galleries, she opened new exhibits and met artists who painted portraits of everyday people. These moments reminded audiences that beauty and culture help us understand one another. As the world changed, the Queen embraced new ways to connect with people. In 1976, she sent her first email. It was a brief greeting. "Best wishes from the Queen." Decades later, she joined Twitter. Her short message read, "Looking forward to the Commonwealth Games." Children saw their Queen using the same tools they used at school. She invited visitors to Buckingham and Windsor palaces. Tourists walked through grand rooms once seen only by a few. They paused under crystal chandeliers and admired painted ceilings. In sharing these spaces, the Queen showed that history belongs to everyone. Her personal strength shone brightest in challenging times. When floods or fires struck, she visited affected areas in person. She comforted families who lost homes. She spoke softly to children who were afraid. When illness or loss touched a community, she sent garden plants, bulbs to grow hope in spring. She understood that a gentle gesture could lift heavy hearts. Through every crisis, she remained a steady presence, a calm voice that said, "You are not alone." Queen Elizabeth believed that true leadership comes from service. She often said that small acts of kindness matter most. A visit to a hospital ward, a letter of thanks to a nurse, a planted tree that grows into a forest. These simple steps built a legacy of compassion. She asked young people to think about how they could help others. What promise would they make? How would they serve their own communities? Today, her story inspires learners and leaders around the world. It reminds us that every one of us can plant seeds of hope. We can support a classmate learning a new word. We can share a meal with a neighbor in need. We can speak kind words to someone who feels alone. In doing so, we honor the example of a monarch who promised, "I will serve my people all my life." May we all carry forward her spirit of duty, compassion, and resilience. And may we each find our own way to leave a legacy of hope and change. In every corner of her long life, Queen Elizabeth II showed us how kindness and duty can shine brighter than any crown. From her days as a curious child exploring the library at 145 Piccadilly, she learned that reading and learning brings strength. In wartime, she sent letters of thanks and worked in the Auxiliary Territorial Service, proving that even small acts, like fixing an engine or writing a simple note, can lift the spirits of many. When she became queen at 25, she did not hide behind palace walls. She promised to serve with all her heart, and she kept that promise through her coronation, her journeys across the Commonwealth, and her many visits to hospitals and schools. She met prime ministers over tea, listened carefully to children's songs, and planted trees to mark each jubilee. She embraced modern tools, sending her first email, sending tweets, and opening the doors of Buckingham and Windsor palaces so that history could belong to all. Even in times of crisis, during floods, fires, or personal loss, the Queen showed that a gentle word, a warm smile, or a bulb planted for spring could bring hope and comfort. She understood that leadership is not about power alone, but about serving others with compassion and resilience. Her legacy reminds us that every small promise we keep, every kind word spoken, every helping hand offered, can make our communities stronger and warmer. Today, as you finish this story, you have practiced listening to simple, clear English and explored how one person's life can teach us universal lessons. The deep lesson from Queen Elizabeth's journey is this: kindness and service connect us all. When we look for ways to help, whether it is writing a note of thanks, supporting a neighbor, or learning a new skill to aid our friends, we carry forward her enduring spirit. Congratulations on listening and understanding this story in English. You have taken another step in improving your listening skills and expanding your vocabulary. Now let us interact together. What is the most important lesson we learn from Queen Elizabeth II's life? A. Small acts of kindness can change the world. B. Power and fame bring true happiness. Type A or B in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story and want more clear, inspiring English listening content, please subscribe to our channel. Your support gives us the energy to make more quality lessons. If you'd like to help cover our costs and keep this channel free for everyone, you can donate. Even a small gift helps us continue creating content that helps you learn. Thank you for listening and for your support.